From 0 to 1 on Starship's crappy landing legs. You've been watching the same videos I have. Of course you have. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. They're on what? It's early March 2021 right now. And it was a few days ago the SpaceX people did that test flight of the serial number 10. And they went up just fine. And they came back down just fine. Exactly where they wanted to come down to. Kudos. They did that flip maneuver. This time with multiple engines in case one busted. And they put it right on the X, and they came down really hard though. They came down on those jinky, janky, crappy, cheapy landing legs, fold out beams of metal with no shock absorption or anything except for metal deformation. Come on, you guys. And look at that. It bent it crumpled, and then it blew up. I guess because one of those fuel tanks busted out the bottom of all the weight of liquid on top of that. And they probably got mixed up, the different fuels, and then kablooey, something was going to go, and there you have it. All right. This drove me a little nuts because these are not sloppy, lazy people, but it makes them look like it to my naive, unaided eye. But they're not sloppy, lazy people. These people did the Falcon 9. These people did the Dragon capsule. So what's up with these cheap and crummy landing legs? Answer something. And it's time for me to learn. Now, I don't know any SpaceX people, but it was a chance for me to dive into this subject and scope around and feel around for what am I missing, which is definitely something, at first anyway. Let's talk about startup theory. Yes, because SpaceX, this is the space company by web2.0.com people. What? Yes, these are very different characters than you'll find in aerospace world. And therefore their methods are going to be very different, how they think, how they act, and the results therefore have the opportunity, at least a chance, of being incredibly different too. They have so far, haven't they? There's this guy named Peter Thiel, and he wrote this book called 0 to 1. Peter Thiel, he was one of the Facebook zillionaire investor dudes. And he wrote this book, like I said, 0 to 1. 0 being the state of your startup where you're just trying to make something work. 1 being you've reached monopoly status, accepted monopoly for task or use X. And he was the first to, or at least publicly, reflect on how Facebook became worth so much and what he was really in the business of doing, and he put it in that book. And he said, look, what we're actually not trying to do is start a company, make some money, show a growth rate, justify being able to borrow more money and grow. No. We're skipping that. The goal is to go straight from 0, bunch of nobodies trying to make something work, to monopoly. Take Instagram. That was like 5 or 6 or 7 guys. They made not one nickel, and then boom, sold for billions to Facebook. He was the first to truly understand, or at least put into language that you and I can understand, that that's what startups really do. That's the business they're really in. And that's what SpaceX is doing. You can say that this has to do with knowing and honoring your real scarcities. What are you truly short of as a startup? Short of money? Not necessarily, actually, but you're short of time and you're short of brains. I'm not saying that any of these startup companies are dumb. What I'm saying is there's only so much that a group of people can experience, reflect upon, learn from, react to, and adjust to. Where there's a biological limit to how fast our brains can work, man. And what that means is to get from 0 to 1, you have to focus on to get from 0 to 1 first, you have to focus on what is the next milestone between here to there. Let me point this out. PayPal, right? Taking credit cards on the internet. Of course, the bank people, the MasterCard people, the Visa people could have done something like that. Maybe they were working on it, but what Mr. Musk knew was that he had a chance of doing it first he had a chance of getting there and making it too late for anyone else to get into it. And that was the business he was actually in. Tesla cars. Of course, GM and Toyota could eventually make some decent electric cars, but Mr. Musk knew he had a chance of doing it first. And that was his strategy. That was the special sauce, making firstness part of the demand set, you know? Yeah. You know, to speak nothing of Amazon.com, right? Mr. Bezos knew that lots of people can sell dang books, but he was going to get to one first. Right. And you can name your example, right? Uber made it first over the finish line of being, the people you drive for and how you get from here to there, et cetera, right? It's not about doing it, it's about doing it first and becoming the monopoly first. And then it's too late, and then you're the only game in town, then you're worth zillions. Another way of putting this, a lot of what I'm talking about right now is this extreme programming term, the spike. Extreme programming is people giving a name and a codification to the concepts that they were discovering along their successful startup journeys. And a spike is just where you do an implementation of thing X and you do it as fast as you possibly can. Not as well, as fast as you can. As a matter of fact, you make it as crude and nasty as you need to, because you're trying to get to an implementation first, because maybe that's all you need. Maybe that's all you need to reach one. And then you can go back and refine it later once you have no competition, right? Or at the very least, in reaching that first implementation, you're going to learn a lot of things that you didn't think you had to learn about yet, or didn't think there were to learn until then. Right, and they have this term, you won't need it later. You won't need it later. Don't try to make everything perfect. This is a spike. We're going to learn a bunch of stuff, and the things that you think, and I point this at myself, the things that you think you have to done perfectly now, actually you're not even going to need later, so don't bother. Does this help explain those jinky-janky, crappy landing legs on the Starship prototypes? I think it does, because they're not trying to land yet. That's not the milestone. That's not the next wall between where they are and one. The wall between where they are and one is not landing. No, it's about hitting the ground on the X, pointed vertically upwards, and hitting that X with a vertical speed less than v sub z. That's what they have to do. It's just like when they were landing the Falcon 9s in the water. Remember that? They didn't have the boat yet. They didn't have the landing leggy things working yet. Right. All they were trying to do at that point was prove to themselves and the world, but I think most importantly themselves, that yes, they did have that solved. They did know how to put the rocket vertically on the X, traveling less than speed v sub z. And once everyone in the building really understood and believed that they had that nailed, then they were able to run full speed at the landing legs and the other accoutrements they needed to flesh that out and actually use that capability that they had demonstrated. Okay. And also, as a little side comment, I happen to know that beer can compression buckling or crumpling, or choose your word, of thin-walled cylinders, like a Starship, that is essentially impossible to computer model, especially when it is not just made in one piece, but many, many welded parts put together with these discontinuities of strength and stiffness where the welding stuff happens and where all the holes and the wires are going in and out and all this kind of stuff. There's no finite element analysis in the world that's going to predict how hard this thing can land, how many G's or what have you, before something goes wrong. So frankly, they're finding where the limits are right now. I think this coming down hard as they have been, I think that's a feature, not a bug. Because as long as it doesn't explode, they're picking it up, they're taking it back in that room, they're cutting some holes in it, they're climbing in, and they're learning, where does this actually fail in real life? And where is it not? What must be stronger? What can be weaker? Why might that be? And they're going to keep applying that to new models to make them lighter and better in real life landing than the computer says so. So how hard is too hard a landing? They're learning that, aren't they? Yes, they are. And that's why I think they're going to be landing and reusing something very soon. Let's watch. Always a pleasure. Next time.